All right, it has to be said, Dolph fans, we need to stop listening to the crying fan and just listen to the realistic fan, because it's not over for Mike McDaniel and Tua. And I think there's something that we need to talk about today after this game. It's kind of something that I've been harping on a little bit, and it's the reality of what we have right now, where going into the season, we have pushed a lot of rookies into roles that we thought that they could be good at. And the one issue with this is that it's the fourth year of Mike McDaniel. But the problem with this right now is we messed up in the beginning, like I said in previous videos, and this is why I don't think it's over for Mike McDaniel. I think, honestly, if they win on Thursday, you got to give them a shot. You have to, people want change for the sake of change, but it's like, if they start winning, and the difference with them winning this year is completely different than the years before, because what ended up happening this year, and I'm always for, if somebody's starting to get it, they'll start to get it. The years before, they spent all their money on like Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb and all these other players, and we didn't have any cap space to sign anybody, and that's kind of been the issue, year by year, where they ended up doing certain things by paying people a bunch of money. And the problem is like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Ramsey, a lot of these players are not on the team anymore, and that's kind of been the issue. Teron Armstead as well. He was a great player, but we ended up blowing a bunch of money on star players instead of building through these things. And the issue is that a lot of those times when we were trading for those players, we would end up giving away first round picks. I think we traded like 3 first round picks for some of these players, among other picks in our draft. And this is what has screwed us up. And what we're really seeing right now is that they're trying to take down the old narrative of spending all this money on players like Tyreek Hill. And I think it's something that where Jalen Waddle becomes a key into this, is that you can see that young players can do the same thing that these other players can do, except you can build a culture through them. Whereas when you get all these free agents, you can't really build a culture, because you put them in a leverage scale where they look down to you because you paid them all this money, so you want them here, versus having a culture being instituted by young players that you drafted and that can work for their money. That's been the key to this team. And I think the reason why it's not over for Mike McDaniel into it, and the reason why this game is a big deal. Now, of course, if they get blown out by the Ravens, it's a different story. But the way that they've been playing this year, I don't think people are really taking into account how different it is, because all of the losses that we've had, they're pretty much by 3 points. Now, we got blown out by the Cleveland Browns in a very weird game. Like, it was a very strange game. I don't know what exactly happened there, but the entire season, the Indianapolis Colts are a different monster. I think we just didn't come prepared to that game. And we had to fight through having a bunch of offensive linemen hurt. I think the change that occurred in this last week, and why I don't think it's done, is that Mike McDaniel changed the culture, where I believe what they were saying is something that Mike McDaniel kind of learned, where Frank Smith, I believe, was up in the box most of the time. And one of the culture changes that we had was actually Frank Smith coming down from the box and being on the field with the players. And I know it may seem like a small thing to you, but I think this was one of the starts of Mike McDaniel being able to adapt and change. And I think it led to a big reason why we ended up winning this game by a lot, because Frank Smith was able to connect with the players and give that leadership that we haven't had for a while, along with Anthony Weaver, putting things together on the defense. And what we have to take from this is, I know everybody wants to have a new coach, and you know what? I have Chris Shula as one of them, and the GM and all this other stuff. But if they can turn it around, and Thursday night they can beat the Baltimore Ravens, and they go on a run, which, if you think about it, last year we were 2-6, same record, and we ended up going on a run. If they can go on a run, one of the key things that I don't think people are really taking into account is, I know the offensive line played a little bit better, but it's been abysmal most of the year. either not this week because it's Thursday, but coming into the week after this week, which I believe it might be the bye after this, or it's close, James Daniels and Austin Jackson probably are close to coming back. They most likely are going to have an opportunity within a week or so to open up the training window and be able to play for the Dolphins, which is going to I don't think people really understand this. Yeah, so let's see. October 30th. When the heck is our bye? Oh, it's in December. Okay, so you have the Ravens, and then possibly for the Bills, November 9th, they could get their offensive lineman back, which is going to completely change the dynamic of this team, because we saw what we could do against the Atlanta Falcons with a passing game where the offensive line was blocking. You saw Tua was able to step into throws, make the accurate throws. And one of the things that I don't think people are talking about enough, which, again, a lot of Tua haters are going to say that this means nothing. He was questionable the last two games with a thumb injury, and it was a left thumb injury. Now, when you think of your left thumb, even if it's a small injury, gripping a football and ripping it is going to be a little bit more difficult to do, which when we look at this last game, and, I don't want to make a big thing about it, but what I did notice is that Tua seemed to have more zip on his passes, where as the last couple games, it just seemed like he was floating passes. Whereas this one, he seemed to be able to really rip the ball. And I'm not saying he was doing it like Justin Herbert or Josh Allen, but what I'm saying is that he seemed to have more zip on the pass. And one of the things that I kept talking about is I thought he lost a step, because his passes seemed slower and not as accurate. And what I'm wondering now is, did he heal up from the thumb injury and now was able to rip some passes into this game? Because I don't believe he had a questionable mark on his, besides the sickness and the illness or whatever, but his hand was fine. And I think one of the underlying issues of these last games, especially with the Cleveland game, is his thumb was he was just not able to grip the ball properly, and that's what ended up happening, alongside the offensive line playing like crap. But if you put all this together, again, play the Baltimore Ravens, you play the Bills, and then you have the Commanders, the Saints, the Jets, the Steelers, and the Bengals. Because this is, death row pretty much from your schedule. Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, Buffalo Bills, Sunday, at home. Then you have the Commanders in Madrid, and then the Saints and the Jets. If you can pull off 5 wins, then you got to give them a chance. If you can beat the Bills and the Ravens, you got to give them a chance. And they've done that before. You have to remember, we went 2-6 last season without Tua, and then he came back, and we ended up going on a run. We went 6-2 and missed the playoffs just barely. And I don't want to take anything away from how great Tyreek Hill is, but I think it's very hard to institute the culture that you want with Tyreek Hill there, because you need to force feed him the ball. And when I think when Tua is his best is when he doesn't need to have a number one receiver. I think that's when Tua becomes his best. And his number one is Jalen Waddle, but Jalen Waddle isn't like Tyreek Hill, where he's not going to cry about not getting passes and targets. He's not trying to fill statistics. He's a team player, and that's why I think we all love Jalen Waddle so much. So again, if you can get past the Ravens and you get your offensive lineman back, biggest game of the season, if you can beat the Bills, which, as we've seen, they are beatable. We even had a shot at beating them if Sealer doesn't hit him on that punt. If you can get past those 2 games and go into this 4-6, you kind of have a shot to do something, because, again, Saints, Jets, those are games you can win. The Commanders aren't impossible to beat, and we'll see if Jaden Daniels, he probably will be back that game, but we'll see if he's there. And the Steelers just lost to the Packers. The Bengals just lost to the Jets. And the Buccaneers, would be the hardest game, and the Patriots, those would be the games that like I said, anything can happen. And of course, again, if they get blown out by the Baltimore Ravens, then it is what it is. But what I saw from this last game, which they all said they were kind of putting it together. I saw a team that if they can go on a run and finish 9-8, who knows? You never know what can happen in the NFL. We'll see. But personally, the whole switching of coaches and all that stuff, what I think is the biggest issue, and again, it changed everything with the Falcons win, is that they're trying to rebuild. Because what they did was they did something really dumb and spent a bunch of draft picks and money on players that aren't on this team anymore. And they learned that. And they're starting to implement drafting players properly and developing them, which, as we can see from this last game for Savai Naya and last two games for Kenneth Grant, they're coming together. And, if you really look, people want to say that they can't draft well or whatever it is. If you really look at this draft class, Kenneth Grant's starting to put it together. Jonah finally had a decent game, which if they can continue stacking those wins, those are going to be two solid picks. You then have Jordan Phillips, who has been playing some snaps, and he's been a pretty decent contributor. Not great, but he's been getting better. You have Dante Trader, who is pretty much your starting safety right now. And you have Ollie Gordon, which Ollie Gordon is starting to really turn his corner, and he's starting to get much more snaps. And Jason Marshall came back last game, looked pretty good, and that would be a draft where you utilized 6 out of, what you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you used pretty much 5 out of the 7 players that you drafted, and they're starting and contributing. That's a solid draft. I think if they can turn it around and go on a win streak, personally, I don't want to rebuild and restart. I want to, it's tough. I know a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, but they went to the playoffs a couple times. If they can do this right, they can build it right and do it right, you could have a shot. Because if you see what we saw against the Atlanta Falcons, that offense with that defense, if they can play like that every game, you got a team. You know what I'm saying? And again, if they can continue building right, instead of rebuilding with a coach and trading away players, you can go into this offseason, have your full 7 draft picks, trade away Bradley Chubb possibly, and come into this next season, or even just keep all of them, come into this next season, first round wide receiver or second round wide receiver, drafting another offensive lineman. You can continue building from this next rookie class. I don't know. Like I said, if they end up winning a couple more games, against these tough teams, personally, I don't want to rebuild. I want to see if they can get it right, because this would be technically, if they got this going, this would be like the first year of the rebuild that they're doing it again, where Mike McDaniel can kind of have a little bit of say. First-time head coach. If they show me that they learned, then they can move forward with adjustments and not continue doing the same stuff. I'm all for giving them, another shot. If they can show me that they learned, if we can string off a bunch of wins and beat high-level teams, because that's been the difference since Mike McDaniel started. We couldn't beat the high-level teams. So far, we've come close on a bunch of them. If they can beat Baltimore and Buffalo, I'd say give them a shot. But, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys want this whole thing teared down and everything like that, let me know down in the comments. As always, praise God, love God. He's great all the time. Love you all. Fins up. Peace.